Hi everyone. So in the previous video, we've discussed about the epithelial tissue and the connective tissue. So in this video, we're going to be learning about the muscle tissue. All right. So what is the muscle tissue? The muscle tissue is basically a tissue that we find in our body that is able to contract and relax. So able to contract and relax, right? And the muscle tissue is a tissue that has a good supply of blood, good supply of blood and nerves. It has a good blood supply as well as a good nerve supply. Now, when we're talking about the muscle tissue, there are actually three types of muscle tissues in our body. There are three types of muscles. Now, when we usually say muscle tissue, what usually comes up into our mind is the first type of muscle tissue, which is known as the skeletal muscles. What are skeletal muscles? Like the name indicates, skeletal muscles are the muscles that are attached to our skeleton. So if there's ever a muscle that is attached to a bone of ours, it's called a skeletal muscle. For example, our bicep muscle, our tricep muscle, the muscles in our face, our facial muscles, the muscles in our leg, they are all connected to bones, and so they're called the skeletal muscles, right? And apart from the skeletal muscles, there are other types of muscles also in our body. So anything in our body which is not a skeletal muscle is usually a smooth muscle. So the second category of muscle tissue is the smooth muscle. And finally, we have the third type of muscle tissue. This is a tissue that is exclusively found only in our heart. And this is called the cardiac muscle. This is the cardiac muscle. All right. So these are the three types of muscle tissues: skeletal muscles, smooth muscles, and cardiac muscles. And it's extremely important to know the differences between these three types of muscles. So if you happen to take a skeletal muscle and observe it under a microscope, this is what it looks like. A smooth muscle looks like this, and a cardiac muscle looks like this. So we need to study the structural differences between these muscles as well as the differences in their functions, right? So over here, I'm just going to do a comparison between the three types of muscles. So firstly, let's name the three types of muscles. We have the skeletal muscles. And secondly, we have the smooth muscles. And the third type of muscle is the cardiac muscle. All right, now before diving into these differences between the three muscles, we will be coming across certain new words, new terms, right? So I'm first going to jot down these new terms that we're going to come across, and you'll have to first familiarize yourself with these terms. We're going to come across terms like uninucleate and multinucleate. So uninucleate is something that is having only one nucleus in each cell, and multinucleate is the condition where a cell has many nuclei in a single cell. All right. And then there are also going to be terms like striated and non-striated. So striated is basically having a striped appearance. So we're going to see some muscle tissue that has striped appearances on them, and some of them do not have this striped appearance. So if there's a tissue not having a striped appearance, it's called non-striated. And another term that you're going to come across is voluntary and involuntary. Voluntary is basically some muscles can be controlled by us. We can control them consciously. So such muscles are called voluntary muscles, and there are some muscles that cannot be controlled. So these types of muscles are called involuntary, right? And one last term, we're going to come across this word called fatigue. Now, fatigue means getting tired, right? So now that you've learned these different terms, let's dive into the differences between the skeletal, smooth, and cardiac muscle. So first up, I'm going to make a quick drawing of these different muscles. Okay, so here's a rough diagram. Here are the rough, simple diagrams of these three types of muscle tissues. As you can see, the skeletal muscles, look at these cells that I've drawn. I've basically drawn three cells, and you can see how long these cells are, right? So when we talk about skeletal muscles, they're usually long cylindrical cells. They are very long and cylindrical cells in this skeletal muscle tissue. And if you consider the smooth muscle over here, you can see that the smooth muscles have spindle-shaped cells. This shape is called spindle shape. So these are all spindle-shaped cells. And if you consider the cardiac muscle over here, you can see that these cells are also cylindrical cells, just like the skeletal muscles. But unlike the skeletal muscles, there are short cylindrical cells. All right. Okay, now here's the next thing you need to know about this skeletal, about these three types of muscles. In the skeletal muscle, inside one cell, you're going to find many nuclei. You see, these cells are very long, right? And these long cells have many nuclei in them. And if you consider the smooth muscles, each cell has just one nucleus in it. And if you consider the cardiac muscles as well, you'll see that each cell has just one nucleus within it. So we say that the skeletal muscle cells are multinucleate because they have many nuclei in them. And the smooth and cardiac muscles are both uninucleate. All right. And the next thing you can see is if you consider this, the skeletal muscles and the smooth muscles, you can see that these cells have no branches on them, right? So skeletal and smooth muscles are unbranched. Both of them are unbranched. Their cells don't branch off. But if you consider the cardiac muscles, you'll see, like in these points, how the cells branch off at the end. So we call them branched cells, right? And another important difference between these between these tissues is that if you look at a skeletal muscle and a cardiac muscle, you'll see something of a striped appearance on them. Now, this is just my drawing over here, and this might not look very clear to you all. So let me show you the actual diagram of a skeletal and cardiac muscle, which is given in the previous slide. So can you all see over here how the skeletal muscle and the cardiac muscle both have somewhat of a striped appearance, and we call them striated. So skeletal muscles and cardiac muscles, they are both striated. So skeletal muscles and cardiac muscles are striated, while the smooth muscles are unstriated. All right. And then if you consider these cardiac muscles, you see now this is the partition between two cells in the cardiac muscle, right? Between these two cells, you find a disc-like structure, which are called intercalated discs. So this structure is only found in the cardiac muscles. So for cardiac muscles, we say intercalated discs are present. And in the case of the other two, they don't have intercalated discs. So these five that I've mentioned over here, these five features are the structural differences between the skeletal, smooth, and cardiac muscle. And in addition to these structural differences, there are also some other differences. For example, if you consider the skeletal muscle can be controlled by us consciously, right? So it's called a voluntary muscle. But if you consider the other two, they are both involuntary muscles, right? Both of them are involuntary. They cannot be controlled by us consciously. And the next feature is regarding whether or not they tire easily, whether or not they fatigue easily. Now, if you think about your skeletal muscles, when we work out and when we are using our skeletal muscles a lot, our skeletal muscles fatigue easily. So our skeletal muscles get tired easily. But if you consider our smooth muscles, they do not fatigue easily. They don't get tired very easily. And if we consider our cardiac muscles, they never get tired. You see, your cardiac muscles have been working from the day you were born, right? And not a single day have you felt that your cardiac muscles are getting tired. So that's the feature over there. So I hope all of y'all got a good understanding on these three types of muscle tissue. So that's all for this video.